Welcome to Women and Resistance, a powerful podcast where we honor the courage, resilience, and revolutionary spirits of women across the globe. Hosted by Aya Fubara Eneli Esquire and Adesoji Iginla, we uncover untold stories of defiance against systemic oppression, whether colonialism, racism, sexism, or economic injustice. From historic icons like Winnie Mandela and Fannie Lou Hamer to today's trailblazers, we shine a light upon those shaping a more just world. This is a call to honor the past, embrace the present, and build an empowered future. Yes, greetings and welcome to another episode of Women and Resistance. And yes, greetings. I am a co-host, Adesoji Iginla, and with me before she goes into character is Aya Fubara Eneli Esquire. How are you, sister?
I am doing well. Thank you.
Okay.
And you can hear me okay? I know sometimes.
Loud and clear.
Okay, good.
We wait for feedback from those listeners as well, and they might, add to it, and then we'll make adjustments as required. Okay, so as is customary, every week we sit and talk about women and the act of resisting in whatever field of human endeavor or beneath a call of existence. But this week is no different. We are looking at the lives and times of Professor Micere Githae Mugo. So, first things first, who is Micere Githae Mugo?
It is an honor to be with you here this evening, and very much looking forward to saying something that will encourage your listeners, your viewers, to embrace the concepts of Ubuntu and Utu, which I will explain in more detail. We live in very perilous times, and I hesitate to say now more than ever, but we are in the now. We must come together and recognize our humanity and the things that connect us. But what I will do is I will read something that I wrote when I was asked this question: who am I? I am not as in the plural of rice, but I am Michere, the one who travels, the one who visits, the one whose name comes from Njeri, one of the 9 daughters of Mumi. Michere is a version of her. I am a woman. I am the mother of Mumbi and the late Njeri. I am a daughter of the Githai family and by a former marriage of the Mugo family. I am a native of Barisho, India Division, Kirinyaga district in Kenya. I'm a daughter of the Kenyan soil. I am a border crosser, defying geographical containment. I am Zimbabwean. I am African. I am Pan-African. I am Nigerian. I am Jamaican. I am an internationalist. I am Black American. I am a transnationalist. I am a citizen of the world. A communalist, mother to my sisters and brothers' children. I am a grandmother to their children's children, and a great-grandmother to their children's children. I am a non-biological mother to countless daughters and sons in all the communities of the world where I have lived. Been reborn many times over and over through naming. No less than 8 children that I know of, perhaps more, have been named after me internationally. Michere has become a name that has traveled across the world. I'm a teacher. I love teaching. I am passionate about teaching. Many titles of distinction as a teacher. I call myself, and my students call me, Mwalimu, one who advocates knowledge and learning. I am a student for life. I am a scholar and an intellectual, not an imposter, as one of my poems argues in my mother's poem and other songs. I am a poet, playwright, and essayist. I am also a novelist in the works. I am a lover of Africana orature and the oral traditions of our people. And I hope that today you would join me as we have this conversation about who we are and our traditions. I am deeply rooted unapologetically in indigenous Africana sites of knowledge, but I am also a creative seeker of knowledge wherever it comes from without barriers. I am a human rights activist driven by the spirit and visions of Utu and Ubuntu. My favorite motto is, because we are. And since we are, therefore I am. This is a quotation from one of my favorite teachers of all time, Professor John Mbiti. In his work on African religion and philosophy, he argues that this is the African philosophy of life, the Shona greeting, in which you ask me, how are you? Ask me, how am I?
How are you?
And my response would be, I will tell you, I am well if you are well.
Well, yeah.
A 2-time cancer survivor, still battling the second bout of multiple myeloma, a cancer of the bone marrow. But I am marching forward. I am a loser at times, but more often a winner. Hi, I'm Micere Githae Mugo. I am above labels and beyond definitions. I have far too many identities to bow to containment. I am a swimmer in the stream of life. I am. Does that answer your question, young man?
Yes, I mean, and you can't have put a final point to it. It's a remarkable insight into a life that we're about to learn more about. And so, how would you say you came into what made you who you are writing?
You always have to start from the source. You have to start from the beginning. Right. So I was born on December 12th, 1942, as I told you already, in Barisho in Kenya. And I was born to what might be described as very progressive parents. My father was a senior chief, Richard Karuga Githai, and my mother was Grace Njeri Githai. You can already see the colonialism, right?
Yeah, the names. Yeah.
Yes.
And I believe you also had a name. You were given a Christian name.
Of course, we were all given these Christian names. As you can see from my writings, I don't use it, but if you want to share, you can share it.
I believe your name was Madeline.
Yes, you would have to study the Bible to understand some of the origins of these names. So, and it's important to note culture and religion, spirituality. We were always a spiritual people. But when you're told that in order to get the education that you believe is necessary for forward movement, that you must take on the names and culture of a different group to be accepted by God. Of course, back then, we just did it. Some, of course, resisted. But those who wanted to get into the schools, you went along. So I attended Alliance Girls High School and Limuru Girls High School. I did marry. I was married briefly to Dr. John Njuguna Mugo, which is where you get the Mugo from. We had 2 daughters, Mumbi Wa Mugo and Njeri Ku Mugo. I will tell you a little bit more about them. I don't go so much into my marriage, just to know that at the point we got divorced and I proceeded to raise my children as a single mother. So I understand life as a woman from multiple lenses, if you will. I earned my Bachelor of Arts degree at Micere University in 1966. Again, as you asked me about my writing, I didn't forget your question. it's important to note that I am who I am because of the opportunities that I was privileged to have. Not necessarily because I was the brightest, because at the time when my father sent me to school, it was actually very common for parents to only send their sons. So many other girls could possibly have had the same life that I
Yes.
had, with under different circumstances. And then in addition to that, you have to look at the boys who also did not get that opportunity because they did not have the resources. And of course, that is still happening today.
Plus,
So, yes.
plus the circumstances of the time, you're talking about a
Yes.
colonial, pre-colonial, and post-colonial
Yes, very much
situation.
so. Very much so. Now, upon graduating, I did continue my studies at the University of Nairobi, and I later also obtained my MA and my PhD degrees from the University of Brunswick, completing them in 1973. So shortly after that, I was obviously one of the better trained, or you say formally educated women of my time, people of my time. And I was recruited and served in 1978 as the first woman to serve as the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at the University of Nairobi.
Kenya.
In Kenya, yes. And of course, at this time, Arap Moi was the president of Kenya. He was, there were all kinds of civil rights infractions, infringements, if you will. And I have always been an outspoken human rights activist. And so, following the failed coup in 1982, and based on my criticism of Arap
His regime.
Moi, yes, I basically had to flee the country. And you can call it a self-imposed exile. But we fled in 1982. I was fortunate enough to, through connections with people, again, I will come back to this concept, but I have never left it, of Utu and Ubuntu.
Ubuntu.
Doors were open to me, and I was able to teach at St. Lawrence University from 1982 to 1984, and then the University of Zimbabwe. Now, understand that Kenya revoked my passport. So essentially, I was a citizen of
Stateless.
nowhere.
Yes, stateless.
Yes. And Zimbabwe gave me citizenship, accepted me and my daughters. And I served at the University of Zimbabwe from 1984 to 1991. So when I say I'm a Zimbabwean, I come about it honestly. But this is who we should be to each other. And I then moved to the United States again through the means of friends and well-wishers and extended community members. And I taught at Cornell University in 1992. And then from 1993 to 2015, I served as professor of African American Studies at Syracuse University, where I became the Meredith Professor for Teaching Excellence in 2007. I also chaired the African American Studies Department from 2005 to 2008, and then directed the African Initiative from 2001 to 2005. And in these spaces, very much understanding the importance of not isolating ourselves in the so-called ivory towers, but that we are part of a greater community.
Yeah.
I also co-founded the Pan-African Community of Central New York and founded the United Women of Africa organization. So now the writing, I'd always been writing, and in fact have contributed to a number of books with other writers that you might know of, like Wole Soyinka and Ngugi wa Thiong'o. In
Thiong'o,
fact, Ngugi and I co-wrote this book. This is a later edition. There are some earlier ones, but The Trial of Dedan Kimathi.
Yeah.
Do you know who this man is? If you don't know, you should definitely know. You want to tell your listeners just a little bit?
You are listening to Women and Resistance with Aya Fubara Eneli Esquire and Adesoji Iginla, where we honor the voices of women who have shaped history through courage and defiance. If you're finding these stories inspiring, take a moment to subscribe, share, and support this platform. Together, we amplify the voices that deserve to be heard. Now, back to the conversation. So Dedan Kimathi used to be the head of the Kenyan Land and Freedom Army. He led the rebellion against the British colonial forces in Kenya, and he was subsequently executed and buried in violation of the traditional rights of the land. I mean, we could go on and on, but that will detract from what you were about to say. You can continue.
Yes. And so my writing first was informed by the oral traditions of my people. We have this now in the African American parlance, we call it call and response. That is a very African thing. I tell you a story, and the story has music in it, and it has what the respondent. In fact, I'll give you an example. This is a Nigerian example. So when they're getting ready to tell the folk tales, the people will gather. In the English version, it will be story. And the people will respond, story. But in one of the indigenous languages, it will go something like this. Sakwi. And the people will answer, war. Then the person will say, Rotunwe. It came to be a time. So in the English version, it'll be like once upon a time. But it came to be a time. Then people will say, so, Rotunwe. And the people will say, Otunwe Roaria. Their response is, when I say it came to be a time, I say, and a time that was kind of like secular, timeless. And then I would say, which is when a dog carries a bag. And the response is, in Segolano here. And what that translates to is, so I say, when a dog carries a bag and the people respond, that means that there's no more shit in the forest, because we associated dogs with always going to eat feces. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. So if the dog has carried a bag, it's like, what I need to eat is not here anymore. I need to travel. And then they will say, and the people will respond, what is the translation? If a chicken now clocks, if a chicken now crows, the chicken, the sound the chicken makes.
Yeah, a cockroach.
The answer is, that means there's no more grass in the garden. In other words, the chicken is always pecking.
Yeah.
So if it raises its mouth to now let out any other sound, it's because there's no more food there, no more grass there for it to peck. And you know what? We can go back and forth like this before the actual story is told. And it's a way of teaching riddles, a way of sharpening critical thinking skills. Because you say, why is the dog carrying a bag? And then the story will go. So you people have a story in English that the kids will read, Jack and the Beanstalk.
Okay.
But before Jack and the Beanstalk, we had traditional stories like one that has to do with Udala tree. And we will sing a song. Udala puo, and the people say, Nda puo puo puo, Nda munye na mo Nda. Back to your question about writing. It came out initially, was informed initially the oral traditions from the stories that we were told, that we heard, the language and the way that we heard our elders conversing and how they will use riddles and parables, right?
Yes.
And then I went to the formal education, and then they say, no, you have to learn Greek and learn Latin.
That's it.
And you have to write prose in such a way and poetry in such a way. And so for a long time, I actually censored myself. It wasn't until I read the text Song of Lawino, and I saw that he was not ashamed to write in the traditions of our people. That I broke free of those chains. But for me, writing it's as natural as breathing. So
without
whether
structure.
it's yes.
Don't enclose yourself in structure.
No structure, because the thing we're calling structure are the constraints that Western education has put on us. Who says there's no structure? So I'm an essayist, but I'm also a novelist, and I'm a playwright, and I'm also a poet. And I say all of that not to be boastful, but to tell our people we don't have to accept the labels, and you don't have to shrink yourself or to be less than what you are. Let's own up to all the largesse of who you are, so that it gives other brown skinned children and all people of the world permission to be themselves. So there's so much that I want to share with you. I don't even know where to start now. We will get back to my honors and things of that nature. So in terms of my life, been exiled from Kenya, basically a stateless person. I became a citizen of the world. And wherever I went, I made it my home, and my intention was to build community. And I was very successful at that. And I stayed in contact with people, even as I traveled, even as my path took me to other places. So I know that you have had opportunity to talk with some of my sisters. My book, my book that deals with Utu and Ubuntu as Africana principles, right?
African origins, yep.
Yes, the imperative of Utu and Ubuntu in Africana scholarship. It's a book that I put together. One of the poems that I actually start the book with, you covered when you talked with my sister Asata Shakur.
Yep.
She says, continue the traditions.
Traditions.
But do you know one of my sisters and very dear friends that you also talk to?
Ama Ata Ida.
Yes. So there are all of these connections, and we supported each other because she and I, at one point, were both single mothers.
And exiles.
And exiles.
Yeah.
Yes.
In Zimbabwe.
When we were both in the United States, she would invite me to come and speak at her school. I would invite her to come and speak at my school. We supported each other in so many ways. There are so many dovetails, we women who have fought this battle, and even the men as well. But I wanted to talk about something while I have this opportunity. And that is, some people say that I coined the terminology of feminine masculinity. I want to break down what I mean by feminism, because in some quarters, it's almost like a bad thing to now say you're a feminist as a woman of African descent. For me, I use basically a definition given by one of my dear friends, my Caribbean sisters, Rhoda, who says, feminism is nothing but the understanding and awareness of women's oppression based on gender and sexism. What is to argue with? What is to quibble about? It is the understanding and awareness of women's oppression based on gender and sexism. When you take that as a definition, then it's not a stretch at all to understand that both men and women can then be feminists.
True.
All human beings can be feminists, because all we're asking you to do is to understand and be aware of the oppression of women based on gender and sexism, not class, not level of education, all of that, based on gender and sexism. So, to the extent that patriarchy is one of the biggest problems facing the world today, and the men are the beneficiaries and the guardians of this patriarchy.
System.
How do you address this structural issue without then inviting men into the conversation? So when people say, oh, feminism is women want to do away with men, no more men, is that possible? Women unilaterally cannot dismantle this structure. The men who are the guardians and the beneficiaries must be part of it. Can an egg fertilize itself?
No.
We need one another.
Yeah.
So let me take this moment to just disabuse some who may have gotten this idea wrong. Yes, are there white women fighting their men? Yes, but that's another issue with imperialism and, colonialism and the kind of patriarchy that white men have really kind of injected as a virus. But I'm not fighting with my brothers or my husbands or my sons or my fathers. Now, the other point, though, is we all, whether you consider yourself a woman, whether you consider yourself a man, whether you consider yourself transgender, whatever your gender is, we all have been socialized to accept this patriarchy. We are all infected with these patriarchal ideas. In fact, you see that within women who, even with no men around, will impose those same ideas on themselves. What is a good woman? What is a good wife? In the United States, the women still cannot come together and elect a woman as president. And it's precisely because of these patriarchal ideas. You saw it with Hillary Clinton's run. You saw it with Kamala Harris's run as well. So both men and women can then become the ones who continue to perpetuate this structure that is so harmful, that leads to the oppression of women. And I am categorically opposed to the oppression of any group of people. But I want to say this very clearly, that when you oppress her, when you oppress your mother, when you oppress women, you are oppressing society. No society can be free, can be liberated while you are oppressing half of that society.
True.
Now, let me say something else too, because when I returned to Kenya, I was interviewed by a number of people, but there's a particular interview that I recall, and they were saying, you've kind of come out on the wrong side of the discussion on homosexuality in Kenya, because they were trying to impose these draconian laws against people who were considered homosexual. And this is what I said to them. I'm not homosexual. However, in the spirit of Utu and Ubuntu, we must embrace all of us, even when some of us might be different from others.
Correct.
How can you now ostracize, demonize, criminalize your own because they might have a different sexuality? And then they wanted to argue, is that not the West imposing their ideas on us? See, only a people who have forgotten their own history, their own culture, can really say that, because we have always had so-called homosexuals in our midst. We did not have that terminology, but we've always had. And if you follow our oral traditions, before we started to sanctify it based on Christianity or Islam or any of that, you will see. So why not embrace everybody? And since I've been saying I will talk to you about this Utu and Ubuntu, let me just share a little bit about what I mean. I do hope that your listeners will try to get some of my books. And I will share what some of them are. But this one that I wrote on the imperative of Utu and Ubuntu in Africana scholarships, was very much to remind us to ground ourselves in our own tradition. In fact, I will read directly from what I wrote. I said, "It has also been my conscious effort to affirm African indigenous knowledges as valid and critical sites for academic engagement. I describe this ongoing engagement as excavating the gold mines of African indigenous knowledge, not just, uranium and cobalt and all of that. We have riches that far exceed these mineral resources."
Yeah.
As someone who's primarily grounded in the creative arts, the task has involved learning from orature specialists and practitioners, people who are embedded in African oracy. In African orature, discourse is both conversational and interactive, as I demonstrated earlier.
Yeah.
The orator considers her or his audience, fellow travelers, and essential participants in the narrative that he or she is unfolding. To ensure this, she will pause from time to time and either ask them a question or invite their involvement, usually by using what the Black arts calls call and response, or by building into the spoken text refrains, repeated statements that reinforce the theme of his or her presentation. So when I talk about Ubuntu, again, it's based on the writings of Professor John Mbiti. I am because you are, since you are, therefore I am. Oratory or verbal art in many African societies reflects this shared worldview. As I already told you about the Shona greeting, you ask me how am I, and I say I am well if you are well. But do you know that we will go beyond that? You see, how are your family? Oh, my family is well if your family is well. How are your cows and chicken? How is your farm doing? My own is well if yours is well. We are connected. In other words, the welfare of one person is tied to the well-being of the other.
True word of
Africana
community.
scholars need to find out how to incorporate this collective and connective perspective of life into their scholarship. We do not have to write like the colonizers, who obviously did not have this concept of interconnectivity, because that is what allowed them to then
break us.
Will. Yeah. And to the extent that we are divorced from this concept of Utu and Ubuntu, you can see how we now hurt ourselves. So what is Utu? So I told you what Ubuntu is, right? I am because you are, and since you are, therefore I am. So Utu is a Kiswahili term meaning Haliyam tukuwa na tabia ya kibinadamu.
Meaning?
You have to ask me what the meaning of that is. And what it basically, it's not a word-for-word translation when you move from one language to another. But essentially in English, the translation would be the state of a person who has the habit of being human. Utu, the state of a person who has the habit of being human. So if you do not have the habit of being human, if like the person that you people elected in the United States, you are in the habit of dehumanizing people, you do not have the habit of being human, therefore you do not have Utu. Talk of Africa's paradoxical statements. Simply, Utu is the capacity to exhibit behavior that is humane. Do you have the capacity to act like a human being, to be humane? So when you see your elderly and you decide that the best route is to make them homeless, to take away their health care, and to take away their feeding, their ability to feed, are you exhibiting the capacity to be humane? Is your behavior humane. In other words, Utu is the philosophy that the soul is paramount and that losing it is worse than losing all of one's material possessions. It is based on the philosophy that to be whole and to define one's personhood and one's humanity, the human physical form is inadequate. In other words, one's soul and inner being are the cores that define personhood, not physical or material manifestations alone. Having wealth, however gratifying this might be to some, the race to become the first trillionaire, while so many in the world are languishing, that however rich you are, if you are spiritually poor, this is a reduction of your personhood. It is therefore imperative that as scholars of Africana studies and research, we should celebrate Utu by affirming the essence of humanity in what we do. The other absolutely critical quality of Utu is the ability, listen up, the ability to then connect one's humanity to the humanity of another. Don't just behave humanely to yourself.
See yourself in others.
Yes. Utu draws from the philosophical well of understanding that John Mbiti expounds in the worldview of indigenous communal African societies. It is with this understanding that Black studies refuted and must continue to refute the notion of exceptionalism that viewed the intelligentsia as a special clique, as the chosen ones that will then get to live above others.
B.B. Du Bois.
And the extent to which people are forgetting how Black studies came about, that it was students and community members, some who never graced the halls of any ivory tower, who put their lives on the line to ask for these studies. How dare we now get into these proverbial ivory towers and then divorce ourselves from our community, and then you write for your dissertation or your tenure panel, talking all kinds of things that nobody else can understand and that has no basis in the community or the liberation of your people. Okay, I'm looking at your time. I know you have questions for me. So much I want to share with you. So I want to share one of my poems with you. Okay? This one is Daughter of My People Sing. So when I say sing, I want you to respond. Even if you are virtual, I can't hear you. I'm going to pause so you too can say sing after me. Okay? Daughter of my people, sing.
Sing after me.
No, you just say sing. Okay? Thank you. Okay. So daughter of my people, sing.
Sing.
Thank you. Sing, girl, sing.
Sing.
Daughter of my people, sing.
Sing.
Rise, sister, rise and dance. Be soulful, be wholeful, be whole. Sing, man, sing.
Sing.
Sing and dance, brother. Rise, rise and dance. Laugh, brother. Be soulful, son, and let the sun shine. Shake the mountains, man the storms, command the hurricane. Sing.
Sing.
Peace, stand on both feet and dance. Sing.
Sing.
And be whole, soulful, daughter of my people. Sing.
Sing.
Thank you. And that is how, because, you see it even in our churches. The first time I went to one of these churches and I said, oh my, the preacher, he's just talking to himself. Just talking. Everybody just sat and looking. In our tradition, if you're talking and nobody is responding, my mother would say, am I talking to myself? Did you not hear me? Act like you're alive. You have to show some response. So that is a major part of our culture and a major part of what we must infuse into our scholarship, even those who are, as they say in the academy. So let me pause. Let me pause. What questions do you have?
I mean, I was just going to buttress your point there where you said it's call and response. Part of African orature is also the act of repetition for emphasis. When I say, what is your name? Can you hear me? What did I call you? So they would repeat your name 2-3 times. How many times did I call you? Is to ensure that you are engaging with the said person. And on the story fin, in Yoruba, we would say alo, which is story.
Story?
Alo. Yeah. So if we say alo, which is, I'm about to tell you a story, and then
I'll
you would
say,
say story. Alo.
okay.
Aha. So that is the essence. And then the story builds by stages. So you say something, just like you were saying with regards to, they would say tabagborile, which is if we stay still, what can happen? Then you get a haircut. So people will start inferring what would happen if. So again, it's a part of engaging. Because like you said, you can't have a preacher standing on a pulpit, just basically talking to a crowd and nobody's responding. You might as well just be talking to a wall. So the emphasis is engagement. And then one final point. When you said,
hold on, when you said that, think about that. You know, I'm a mwalimu, I'm a teacher. And do children and even adults, do we not learn more and retain more when we're engaged?
of course.
How many of you have sat in front of someone and just go, even now that I'm talking to you, I'm trying to engage you, because otherwise, for you to just listen to me talking, I think I have a nice voice, but for you to just sit and I'm just talking, just and for 60 minutes, hey, you will not even remember what I said. So as a teacher, if you really want to engage your students, get them to think, to follow along. You ask questions, you get them involved. Yes, and that engages a lot of more of their senses. They're not just using their ear or their eyes. They're using eye. They are speaking. They might be moving. Because also, don't get us going in our traditional origin. Body movement will now join the thing.
Yeah. Feet
Whatever. Yes.
Yeah.
We're an expressive people. And I think that is not something that we should be ashamed of. By the time, I'm seeing when I visited some of the schools, or, like I said, I was a grandmother, great-grandmother to a lot of children in my community. My home was always open. If you were someone you needed something, but my home was always open, And I said, sit down, quiet hand, quiet feet, no talking, no this. And you want a child to stay like that for 6-7 hours of schooling all day. No wonder the children are getting into trouble. Does that not make sense?
Because they're bored.
Can you sit like this? Are you a piece of wood? You're not. It's actually common sense. And so we need to engage in all of these structures and infuse our culture and to show how some of the things that we're accepting as this is how it should be. Like I said, with even how to write poetry and everything. Says who? Says who? Can a child not dance and learn?
Yeah.
Hey, go and see the children now with what do you people call this thing? The hip hop. You tell me the child can't read, but the child can know the whole song from beginning to end. They clearly can learn. We have to engage them in a way that works. Okay, you are about to ask another question.
So I was going to say, I was going to highlight the point when you mentioned Ubuntu. I am because you are. In the course of your travels, when you went to the States and you wanted to come back to Africa because you felt that's where your calling will be best impacted, you applied for a job in Zambia as a professor of literature at the University of Zambia. You got the job and you were on your way and landed in London for a stopover. Only you get the information that you are not allowed to come into Zambia. Something then happened. You saw...
Tell the story, yes.
Yeah, you saw, what's his name? You saw Grace Mugabe. Grace Mugabe was the first wife of Robert Mugabe, who happened to
Yes.
be of Ghanaian descent.
Yes.
And because you had participated in the anti-colonial movement against South Africa, the liberation of Zimbabwe, Namibia, and
Yes.
Mozambique, she said, oh, there's an opening in Zimbabwe. Why don't you apply for it? Again, because you've contributed to making the lives of someone better elsewhere, people were also looking out for you in your time of need. So I just wanted to highlight that particular incident that turned out to be, a positive. And then there was another one. And this one is...
Did you ever find out why Zambia did not want me to come?
So apparently Kenneth Kaunda, who happened to be Zambia's first president since independence, got leaned on by Daniel Arap Moi to say, do not allow that woman, that's the expression, that woman to come into your country. I don't know why you, as an independent country, would take advice from a clearly despotic head of state at that time. So that is one of the reasons for that thing happening. But there was one other thing that, and this
let me first commend you. I'm very impressed by your research and your knowledge of our leaders, because that is something that too many of us don't know anymore. And yes, this landscape of politics, things happen. You might not even know why they happened, but these are some of the challenges that I experienced. But like you rightly pointed out, there were also, for all the doors that closed, for all of the tragedy, and I will tell you about one that really shook me to my core. There were always people also who tried to assist me. Yes, that woman. And of course, even today, I think it was Malcolm X that said it, that the Black woman is the most disrespected human on earth, on the face of the earth. Yes, it continues today.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And so, you raised the book earlier, The Trials of Dedanki Mafi, which which is a play she co-directed with Ngugi wa Thiong'o.
I co-directed.
The beautiful thing about that those two was the fact that Ngugi, in his book Decolonizing the Mind, would say every morning they would stop in the corridor and they would talk about history, politics, and literature. They will only break out of that conversation when it was time for class. And they were standing in the corridor right opposite each other's door to go into their offices.
Yes.
So again, those are the kind of call and response. You know someone is there for you as a sounding board, creating that avenue. What would you say to people who are now, obviously, in the kind of incredible times we live in, that need that kind of sounding board and space? How do we create or recreate what kind of symbiotic relationship you had with Ngugi wa Thiong'o?
That's a very, very insightful question to ask, because you don't know everything. You can go very far, I suppose, if you just yourself going. But the journey is better, it's more meaningful, and you're less likely to now be too exposed where calamity hits and you're dead if you're going with other people, And Gugi was my dear friend and brother. What I would say to people is you have to be intentional about going to spaces where there may be like-minded people. You have to be intentional and open to engaging with people. You have to do your own work in private so that when you open your mouth to talk to people, you have something valuable to say. Because if you open your mouth and you don't know what you're talking, they might not invite you next time. They might, when you see somebody coming, if you see them before they see you, you just like duck really quickly because you don't want to be engaged in nonsense conversation. So you have to do your own studying. There are no shortcuts to these things. But as you engage with people. It sharpens your mind. You get information you did not have before. You're not adversarial. You're helping each other grow, get better. And that opens corridors. And so it was during one of these conversations, and we kept saying, oh, we should write something. And first we were going to try and do it via correspondence, but that was a little too difficult. And then we eventually found ourselves in the same area, and we traveled together to our ancestors, so to the Dedankematis place, and there were people living who could tell us the stories of who he was as a child and all of that. And then we started to, work together to write back and forth. And one of the most rewarding experiences of my life, and as like I said, I went on to write and contribute to many other books with other writers as well. But to answer your question directly, you need to study yourself, have something to offer. And then you need to find where are some like-minded people. You don't have to be in the university and academia to do this. There are community members, there are libraries in the community. And let me tell you, if there are not people gathering to read, then you start something.
Yeah, great one.
You start something and don't get discouraged. People will come, people will go, whatever. You stay steadfast in what you're about. That is very important. But of course, now you people with all this technology, you can actually, correspond even with people that are not in your immediate vicinity. But it's very important, very, very important to do. Yeah.
So, in terms of the culture of writing, how would you advise people to proceed? Because everybody has a story to tell.
Well, this is true. Although, so you have to first be aware that you have a story to tell. So I think that something that greatly contributed to my writing, like I mentioned earlier, was the oral traditions and just hearing those stories. But then it was also reading other writers. I think that to be a good writer, it's helpful to also read other writers. And then there's no getting around. You must write. You must write. Not think about writing, not pray about writing, not hope to write. And you're not necessarily writing because every line I write is going to be Pulitzer Prize winning, whatever. That is not what should motivate you to write. It should be the telling of a story, the sharpening your own mind by putting your thoughts down on paper. It should be the wanting to leave a legacy for others. And so you give yourself permission to stop censoring yourself. And you just write. Now, there might come a time when you write and you realize, or someone around you that you share your writing with says, you must do more with this. But, like poetry, I just wrote. And when I had a play that I felt needed, or story that needed to be told, what better way to tell the stories of our ancestors than through plays? Can be acted out where the people can come alive to the audience. But then the essays were also about me stretching my mind around a concept or a thought. What do I really think about this? And what is the basis for my belief or my thought or whatever conclusion have I arrived at? And as you write, you're sharpening yourself. And if you give someone that writing to read and they have some questions for you, then it allows you to even go and further think to things. And it is through this process that we're also going to problem solve, right? So that is what I would share. Now I'm mindful of the time, and I cannot have this conversation with you without speaking about my daughters, Mumbi and Njeri. They were my daughters, but I call them my friends and I call them my comrades. We went through this life, the exile, the concerns and feeding and how we were going to travel and where we were going to live, everything. We experienced it all together. And they were my caretakers when I battled cancer the first time. They will also, some of you may have met them anywhere I went to speak. Mumbi and Njeri, maybe both of them, maybe one of them, they would be in the back of the room with my books. They were the ones who coordinated so much for me. Wonderful daughters. They they imbibed the culture. In fact, some of, every person that I was involved with is an auntie, is an uncle, is a sister, is a brother, and some of their aunties and uncles would when they would talk about my daughters, they were just so impressed about how open in terms of our African hospitality they were. I raised them to know our culture. And they took care of me when I was battling cancer the first time. And I even got a bone marrow transplant. Oh, it was such a painful experience. And then I was in remission for a few years. But cancer likes when your life is in disarray. Cancer likes when you are stressed out. So, message to all of you, find ways to have more of a peaceful existence. So, Jerry ended up with cancer herself, ovarian cancer, when she was teaching in China. And Jerry died in 2012. And my mother also passed away around this. And I'm telling you, it just threw my life into a tailspin. And don't you know that cancer came back, and it came back this time with a vengeance. And so I battled that until I finally chose to go and meet my ancestors in 2023. But I have no regrets about my life. I have no regrets about being the activist that I was from a young age, and that I consistently lived what I believe. I received many awards as a result of some of the work I did. I was awarded a Doctor of Letters honorary degree from the University of Nairobi in 2020. I was awarded the Elder of the Burning Spear in 2012. I was awarded the Mwalimu Julius Nyerere Distinguished Lecturer Award. I received the CUNY Woman of Distinction Award, other academic distinguished Africanist awards. I was named the Laura J. and L. Douglas Meredith Professor for Teaching Excellence, becoming the first Black person at Syracuse University to receive this honor. In Kenya, the East African Standard Century publication of November 2002 cited me among the top 100 influencers in Kenya.
Yeah.
During the 20th century. And I have quite a few publications. The Long Illness of Ex-Chief Kitty, which is a play. The Daughter of My People, Sing, my poetry collection. The Trial of Dedan Kemati, co-authored with Ngugi wa Thiong'o, which was a play. Visions of Africa, the fiction of Achebe, Margaret Lawrence, Hochti, and Ngugi. We all worked together on this.
Yeah.
1991, I published African Oratory and Human Rights. It's a book of essays. 1994, I published My Mother's Song and Other Poems. I also wrote the introduction to Ngugi wa Thiong'o's Pen Points, Gun Points, and Dreams. Also wrote various essays in anthologies on African literature and women's writing. And then this was really near and dear to my heart, writing and speaking from the heart of my mind, which is an autobiographical reflection and speeches of mine. Aha! Oh, I was looking rather beautiful on that cover. Yes. And of course, the book I already mentioned, The Imperative of Utu and Ubuntu in Africanist Scholarship. There is also a documentary that was made about me. It's called Making Life Sing in Pursuit of Utu.
True.
The Micere Githae Mugo story. And it also has a companion book of the same title. That is just a little about me. How can you sum up a life well lived in just an hour or so? But hopefully your listeners will take from my life that you must take risks in life.
Yeah.
You must speak up for what you believe in. Because otherwise, what is the point? You must pursue whatever gifts and talents. And it doesn't matter if you think you're not good at it, do it anyway. Do it and maybe you become better at it. And even if you don't become greater at it, if it brought you pleasure, if it helped you better understand people, if it allowed you to show up, to show your capacity to behave in a human way, then it is worth it.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today.
No, thank you. Thank you for coming through. Thank you for coming through. And by that token, we've come to the end of today's episode of Women and Resistance. And we've been listening to you, Micere Githae Mugo. Next week, I will be the turn of Julia de Bogus. Who is she? We'll find out next week. And any final thoughts?
We come from such rich traditions. It is our responsibility to live them and to pass them on.
And with that, I shall say good night and see you next week. That is it for this episode of Women and Resistance. Thank you for joining us in amplifying the voices of women who challenged injustice and changed the course of history. Be sure to subscribe, share, and continue the conversation. Together, remember, we honor the past, act in the present, and shape the future. Until next time, stay inspired and stay in resistance.